Good afternoon, everybody. And saying afternoon, if somebody's watching this in the future, you may not know when we're making this tape. And actually, it's April of 2020. We're right in the middle of this coronavirus, and this COVID, as they call it. And it's made a strange situation for us. And this is our fourth tape here at 12 Oaks Baptist Church. And every day that I make a tape, I'm going to tell you who's participating in this. I've got Mickey Watson over here to my side, who will be singing in a minute. And Brother Lyon is in the back here making the tape for us. And I think next time we make a tape, we're going to get him out front and let you see who's making all these for us and taking care of us. But might even make him do a little work, and maybe have him sing a song or do the prayer for us or something like that. But anyway, we're glad to be here. And I've got a part of another group because we go around on Mondays, every Monday, when you can go into assisted livings and rest homes. You can't do that right now, and do a program for them. And we have a group that goes with us, and I always give their names because they can't be here. We're in a situation where we have to stay 6 feet apart and not touch and do things like that. So this room is not big enough to have everybody in here and introduce them. So I'm going to give their names a little bit later in the devotion. It's going to be part of my devotion. So we're going to get started with a word of prayer. And we have so much to pray for especially during this time. So many people are struggling with their health, and we've had so many people die. And the shut-ins, they can't have visitors, and so many people are struggling financially and emotionally. Home abuse is up, with people staying at home. Some of it is a wonderful time, and some of it it's stressful, and some of them are really suffering with business and loss of jobs. So we got so much to pray for right now, and we're going to pray for you shut-ins that are watching this. So if you will, bow with me, and we're going to have a word of prayer. And here we go. Father, I just ask that we've got so much that needs healing here, Father, on this old earth that you've given us that we love so much. We've got all kinds of new situations. It's causing sickness and strife in the home, and loss of jobs and loss of business, and it's putting stress on the governments everywhere, Father. Just so much new stress that we're not used to. Some of us, it's slowed down our lifestyles, and we can do other things to try to help people, but it's hard to reach out because we're not allowed to go in homes or anywhere to visit people. And we just need a lot of healing, Father, and comfort from you. Just bless this old earth and heal us and comfort us, and all those that are suffering so much in all the different ways, Father. Just be with them and help them in any way that you can. Well, you can anyway, but I mean, whatever your will is in their life, give them comfort and healing with it. And we ask these things in thy name, Father. Amen. Okay, we're going to get started off with a good part of the program. Mickey's going to sing for you, and you're going to be blessed by it, because I am every time I hear him sing.
Amazing grace, no sweeter song I know. How I love to tell how love lifted me, how he came and made me whole. Oh, but I'll have a new song over in glory, a song the angels cannot sing, and for a million years I'll tell the story. I have been redeemed. We'll sing that happy praises while the ages roll. Then we'll take a stroll right down the streets of purest gold. I'll have a new song over in glory. I'll sing it while the ages roll. I can almost hear that melody. It's ringing out across life's sea. Voices of my friends so dear to me. sing that happy praises while the ages roll. Then we'll take a stroll right down the streets of purest gold. I'll have a new song, will bring glory. I'll sing it while the ages, I'll tell it while the ages, I'll shout it while the ages roll.
I've got something special today. I'm going to do my devotion about the Lord's Prayer. And I was reading my Bible and studying it, and I have a version that they call the ESV version, English Standard Version. There's a lot of versions of the Bible out. They started years ago with, I think they called it, what was that first one they came out with, a little green Bible?
The International Version?
International Version, something like that. And you know what? It makes it easier to read in our language today, but you have to be careful with some of these versions. And I always go back when I'm going to buy a new version and look at the King James Version and see how much they change it before I buy one. But I really like the English Standard Version. But in this particular scriptures, in Matthew 6th chapter about the Lord's Prayer, they kind of changed it. They left that last verse off there, and I don't know why, where it says, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And that, to me, that's an important way to close the Lord's Prayer. But we'll get to that later. But what I brought today is the King James Bible. And I've got my Bible that my parents gave me in 1957. This was a really common Bible back then, this size here. And mine's about to come apart. I think I'm going to have to take it to a bookstore when it gets open and get it rebound so it'll stay together. But this 1957, I was 14 years old. I'm giving away my age right now. But boy, the 50s were a special time. I was lucky to grow up in the 50s. I always feel fortunate and raised by Christian parents, and it was a great time. But in studying about the Lord's Prayer, and it's part of the Sermon on the Mount, and I think all of you know why it's called the Sermon on the Mount. But if you know, when you get to reading something in the Bible, sometimes it'll reference something else. You want to figure out what the status, what's going on with what the Bible's saying, whether it's something about Paul wrote or in the Old Testament or whatever. But Jesus up on a mountain, and he's actually preaching probably to a lot of people, because I think he got up on the mountain to get away from the crowd and get up above them so they could see him and hear him. And in studying one time when Brother Lyon, I've told you in one of our devotions that he's gracious enough to ask me to let me do Wednesday night service. I did a devotion about, and I called it A Day in the Life of Jesus. And I may do that one again in the near future, is what a difficult life he had in his ministry. I mean, people were around him all the time after his reputation got out, and they were around him for a lot of different times, but it was just throngs of people. And people would bring their family or a friend they wanted healed, and they wanted to hear him speak, and people wanted to touch him. And you know what happened? The thousands that showed up, and that's how they ended up having what I call the great fish fry. It was so many people, the disciples didn't know what to do with them. And Jesus had a tough time, and so he got up on a mountain and he's teaching and preaching, pretty long part of the New Testament here in Matthew, but some really, really good advice and to tell us and show us how Jesus lived and give us an example for it. But to lead up to what I'm going to say, there in the Lord's Prayer, if you go back in the first few verses, now the Lord's Prayer really starts out in verse 5. Well, not verse 5, but verse 9, I'm sorry. But if you go back and read the other 8 verses, you'll find there's some things in there that Jesus is telling you that we shouldn't do. I mean, the Christian life is about things that you should do, but there are some things in there that you shouldn't do. And Jesus is telling us, I'm just going to point out a couple of things, but you really need to read Matthew 6th chapter, and it's all Jesus speaking. It's in the red verses. But he's talking about when you give alms, like you're giving money to the poor or something. He says, let not thy left hand know what the right hand doeth. And he said, let thine alms be made in secret. And what he's saying here is really, you don't want to do things for show, And he's kind of leading up to prayer. And he says, when thou prayest, he said, thou shalt not be as the hypocrites are. And that's the word he used, hypocrites. And he says, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and in the corners and on the streets. And you know what? Praying in the synagogue should be a good place where you pray, and even on the street. Sometimes you can go to cities now, and you'll find somebody standing up on a box or something and preaching, but most of the time now, I think we think they're a little bit off, as we call it. But if you want to get people's attention, you can do that. But he says, if you're doing it for the wrong reasons, if you're doing it to be showy, showing off, whether it's helping the poor, giving alms, or whatever, if you're flapping your lapels, as they call it, you're doing it for the wrong reason, and you're not going to get any credit in heaven. You might get a little credit and fame here on earth, but that's fleeting and it won't last. So when we get down to verse 9, in verse 8 he says, be not ye therefore like unto them, for your Father knoweth the things that you do. These are the people that he said are doing it for the wrong reasons, have need of it. But he said, therefore you ask him, and he said, in this manner pray. And he starts out really in the middle of a verse 9, with the Lord's Prayer. And he says, pray in this manner. And it's an example for us. But Jesus was teaching, and he gave us just a model prayer. And he does not want you to recite this prayer every time. He wants, prayer is actually a conversation with the Lord. We make it complicated sometimes. And we think our words have to be flamboyant and catch people's attention. But actually, prayer really is personal, because he talks about that too. He tells us sometimes we should go in a private place and have prayer. And really that's one of the best ways. It's almost like meditation. If you have a conversation with the Lord in a private place in your home where it's quiet, and prayer to me, it's more than reading the Bible. Now, I've told you this before, I repeat myself a lot. I can read a newspaper, I could read the Reader's Digest or a golf magazine or something, and the grandkids will be running around the house like a bunch of Indians, and it won't bother me. I can read that and get the gist of what it's saying. But reading the Bible, I have to have quiet. I have to have solitude, and I have to concentrate on what I'm reading. And that's the way prayer is. And I think that's what Jesus is telling us. It's a serious business, and talking to the Lord is serious business. You don't want to do that flamboyantly. So that's what he's telling us here. And starting out, he says, we start out in the middle of verse 9, and he says, our Father, which art in heaven, our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Now, it's quite likely I might not get through all these verses in the Lord's Prayer. If we don't, we'll finish it next week. But I've got to stop when he says, our Father, which art in heaven, ours. And you just think about that. We use the term we sometimes, talking about more than one of us, or we talk about ours. And there's different things when it comes to religion, I think. And we say our church. Our church. Boy, our church is so important to us. And really, I've had 3 churches in my life that all I've gone to. Here I am, 77 years old. 3rd church that I've really been a member of. And every one of them, my first church I went to was in El Dorado, Illinois, and I was a really young kid before we moved here in Kentucky. But when we moved here, I was getting big enough to know about things and realize things, and joined a church called Spring Bible Baptist Church out in the western part of McCracken County, and grew up in that church as a teenager. Man, I remember Bible school, and the kids that we went to church with, and we've had RAs and GAs back then. Some of you people that listen to this, you won't know what RAs. It's Role Ambassadors, and the girls ambassador was called GAs. RAs and GAs. And you know what? I learned more scriptures in Bible school and RAs that stuck with me than any other time in my life, I think, because they made us memorize them. That was a part of our uh, things that we did back there. And Bible school's still big. It's big here at our church. I mean, and I hope we get to have Bible school this summer. It looks like if we do, it's going to be something different. But if we can't have Bible school this summer, our children and the people that work in Bible school are going to miss a big, big lesson. But our Father, and the term Father, that is so special. Our Father who art in heaven. It's in heaven. That places Jesus apart from any other. You know, we've got an earthly dad. We've got an earthly father. And some people call their priest or their preacher father. But that term that was set aside when we call our Father in heaven. We are talking about God. We are talking about God, and it is special. And then it goes on after it says that our Father in heaven, it says, hallowed be thy name, thy name. And the name, you know, there's other places in the Bible where we're explicitly warned about taking Jesus or anybody's, but especially God's name in vain. Your name is special. And that's where I wanted to stop. I said I was going to introduce our group a little bit later. I always introduce this group, and I'm going to say something about names right now. And I just wrote down arbitrarily Billy Rushing. He'd love to be here today. Billy's retired. He's been active in the church. My goodness, he served in the Air Force. I gave you their life history one other time, I think the last time. But the name Billy, when I think of Billy Rushing, it's that name. That name goes with a lot of things. His family, his wife Faye, and his children, and the places and now he works in the church after he's been retired for many years. Quite frankly, he had so many back surgeries, he's wondering he can even walk anymore. But you know what? He goes with us on Mondays and is a delightful person. Bobby Rollins. Billy lives in Michigan, but God worked it out where he comes down here and stays with his daughter for a time during the summer. And he started as having something to do, wanting to be active in the church, going with us. And what a delightful asset he's been. In fact, I had my knee operated on in January and couldn't go around to our programs, and he covered for it and did very well in doing our devotions when we went around. And Glenn Hobbs, I hope you get to meet Glenn one of these days, and we may have to have a longer program when we do, because Glenn's a real talker. If we give him the microphone, he's going to tell you about a few things. But Glenn has a hard time getting around because he's got an oxygen tank, but he don't let it stop him. He makes sure he's got plenty of oxygen so he can share the word with people when we go around, and he's just a real delightful man that has served, a Christian man that served in his church all these years. And he's found another place where he can serve in doing our assisted living ministry. And Glenn Tankersley and Dolores, they're the only couple we got with us. And quite frankly, Glenn and Dolores are having a difficult time with their health right now. And Glenn's having a difficult time walking, and they're still at home, taking care of each other. And if there's any way, when this COVID-19 thing lets us get back to assisted living, some way I think Glenn and Dolores will be with us, and that's one of our prayers. But they've been lifelong Christians and really, really served well. And Mickey Watson sitting over here. My goodness, what can I say about Mickey? You've heard him sing several times if you've been watching these tapes, and he's going to sing again this morning. But when I think of Mickey, I don't think of, everybody wants to think of Mickey Mouse, and he gets kidded about being Mickey Mouse. But I tell you what, around Paducah, he's got a better reputation than Mickey Mouse has, and him and Mickey Mouse do have something in common. When you're around Mickey Watson, you're going to be laughing before you're around him very long. And if you don't watch it, he's going to entertain you with stories the whole time he's here. And Mickey just he's full of life. He loves life. He loves everything. His grandchildren, his church, his God has given him a voice. It's wonderful. But every one of these names, as I went through here, they're special. Brother Lyon sitting back here. He's Brother Lyon. And you know what? Some people, some people, especially pastors, are big on a title or something. But a lot of people, our church called Brother Lyon Brand. And it's because he's not only become their pastor, he's become a friend of a lot of people. It's a real brother in Christ, as well as our pastor and senior minister here. So the name is important. Hallowed be thy name. And it's important to God. Hallowed be thy name. And you know what? There's scriptures in the Bible and some in the Old Testament, where God changed people's names. It's important. It's important about your name. Hallowed be thy name. And thy kingdom come, and thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Thy kingdom come. That's a future thing there. Your kingdom come, and thy will be done on earth. Right here, we're on earth right now, but one of these days that kingdom is going to come. But the thing in the middle of this verse, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That is one thing, and it's right here in the Lord's Prayer, the God's will. That's one thing people have a tendency, I think, to not really focus on and realize what Jesus is teaching us here about His will. And I talked about 3 churches. Now, when I was younger, going to the church, my first church, and I was younger going to my second church. And I didn't serve on committees. I was growing up, and I was a teenager, and in my early years, Rudell and I went to Spring Valley Baptist Church after we were married. But even as a young married person and being raised in church, I wasn't what you call involved like you are when you get older and you start serving on committees and you serve as a deacon and you serve all these ways that you can serve as an usher or greeter, just trustees there's so many things in a Baptist church and that old nominating committee, they'll get you to serve on them. But serving in church, and I wasn't used to what we called our will. And after you get a little older in church, you realize there's certain things that have to be taken care of. And you know what? Things will come up in a church. If you serve as a deacon, you serve on a finance committee or something like that, things will come up in church, and you might have a disagreement on it. And the one thing I've learned good about prayer, and sometimes I forget, when you can't figure out if there's a disagreement or something, just pray for the Lord's will to be done. The Lord's will to be done. Lord's got a plan for everybody in the church, and He's got a plan for a church. And if you get away from it, you know that churches split and they do everything else. But if you get away from God's will, that's what causes that. If you stay in God's will, you can sit in those business meetings, and us old Baptists, we're famous for our business meetings, but you can sit in those business meetings and discuss and let your opinions be known, but do it in a godly way if you're praying for God's will to be done. I'm taking a lot of time here, so I said I might not get through this, so we'll finish it up later if we don't. And then it says in verse 11, give us this day our daily bread. Give us this day our daily bread. I tell you what's going on today gave me an opportunity to discuss daily bread. And our country, we have been so blessed. Everybody, you know, we have to recognize that we have different levels of people that have acquired things in our country. We've got people that are super rich. We've got people that are rich, and we got people that are well off, and then they call it the middle class and lower class and upper class, but we really got more than that. But I think the poorest people in this country probably got a whole lot better than a whole lot of people in the whole world, because this country has been blessed so much. And even in my lifetime, when I was growing up, I think I've said this before, I grew up in a home where my dad worked out of the home, but my mother didn't. And I had 2 brothers, and we lived in a 4-room house and had 1 car. But we had a great lifestyle. We were middle class, and back in the 50s and 60s growing up. And this country began to get so affluent, and now we've just got super affluent. I mean, you look now in the car registration in McCracken County, we don't have that many more citizens. We're had about the same citizens we had back in the 40s and 50s. But you know what? With one car registered to a home, and now you got 2, 3, 4 vehicles sometimes registered to a home. That it's just phenomenal how many more cars, how bigger the houses are. And I had a transistor radio in my bedroom when I was growing up, and that was it. Now every room's got a TV in it and a stereo system and everything. We're just very affluent. God has blessed us so much. But here we are praying for our daily bread. And in America, we're not used to not even thinking about not having our daily bread. But I'll tell you what, this country, we got a few bad habits sometimes. And I'll make it simple and to kind of lead up to this virus thing. But around here, if we get a prediction in the wintertime that it's going to snow, and Mickey works for a company called Prairie Farms, he could talk about this better than I do. But if we get a prediction that it's going to snow, the sooner as it comes out on the news, the supermarkets are wiped out of bread and milk and bologna and everything else, basic stuff. It's just you go, if you don't hurry to Kroger's or Walmart or Aldi's or something like that, Super Value, you ain't going to get no bread or milk, because it's going to be gone. And just from a weather forecast that said it's going to snow. And when this virus thing started, and people were going to have to start staying at home, and now they still got stories about coming out that our food supply system, they're calling it breakdown, and they're having trouble with meat processing plants because people are sick and they can't keep them open. And when a story comes out like that, you can go down here in West McCracken County to a little old store that specializes in meat. And if you go down there at 8:30 in the morning, you probably gonna wait till noon or later before you get waited on, because there's such a long line down there and people order meat. And it's just, and the supermarkets are wiped out of meat, and it gets crazy. And so, praying for our daily bread, we need to put a little more practical in this. And you know what's causing all that? When people go in there, they think I don't know what they think they're buying for the whole year or something. I was trying to find, we're supposed to wear a mask right now. If you're watching this later and don't really know what I'm talking about, I tried to find a bandana, because I don't really like to wear those masks. They're hot, and some people just trying a bandana over their face, and you can wash it and get a lot of use out of it. You can't buy a bandana or a big colored handkerchief around here. And the reason is everybody goes in there and they buy 10 or 15 or everything the store's got. And I give up. And I guess I'll make me one out of paper, but you know what? You can't buy toilet paper or paper towels either. So I don't, it's kind of ridiculous around here. It's funny. But the Lord says, just pray for your daily bread, daily bread. People are getting ridiculous about it. And I just like to tell you about things like that so we can share some of these comments. And I'm watching my time here, but we're not going to go too long. But we said, pray, give us this day our daily bread. You know what? And what's happening, all this thing, is people are hoarding stuff. You know, several years ago, somebody predicted, and it wasn't scientific, or maybe it was, that we was going to have another great earthquake around here. And of all things, people went out and bought beans and bottled water. And I guess they bought the beans because that's something you can store in your house, because they thought we weren't going to have electricity, natural gas. They were going to build a fire outside and boil beans. And people bought it. Mickey's laughing over here if you can't hear him. And people bought so many beans and stored them under their bed. And they bought all the bottled water and tanks of water you could get to store in their house, because they thought the water lines was going to break when we had this great earthquake. Well, that time passed, and then it started raining, and Mississippi and Ohio River got up, and people was making jokes that all those people was hoarding that water and poured it out and made all the rivers flood. So it's kind of funny, but people should realize that the Lord's going to let us have our daily bread if we're really faithful and put our faith in Him. It's my goodness. And I think I'll do this one here, and then we'll probably wait and do the rest of it next week. But it says, "Forgive us our debts, as we have forgiven our debtors." If we have forgiven our debtors. You know, Jesus is tying two things there. He said, and this is talking about sins, not money necessarily. He's talking about sins, things that people do to us, irritate us. I was talking about people that couldn't get along church sometimes because they forget they need to be working on God's will rather than their own satisfactions. But forgiving people of their things that they have done to us and holding a grudge. My goodness. But he's kind of tied it to, if you hold a grudge against somebody, and you know the Bible tells you, if somebody hurt your feelings, you should go to them and talk to them about it. And you know what is also tied to that? If somebody has offended you, I don't care if it's a relative, a good friend, or just somebody that it doesn't make any difference. But if it's a friend or family, you really, really need to take care of it. But what goes with this is prayer. Pray for God's will and pray for Him to help you have forgiveness in your heart. And you go to them and talk to them. That's something. But God wants us to forgive people just as He forgives us. And you know how God forgives us? He forgives us like you forgive your children. How many times have you forgiven your children for doing something they did that you didn't want them to do as they were growing up? You couldn't count the many times that you've forgiven them over and over and over. When they were real little, when they were teenagers, even after they're married, people still make mistakes. And they're still your children. And sometimes when they're old enough to know better, you still have to forgive them for things they do when they hurt your feelings. And you know what? A sin really is hurting God's feelings. Just think of it that way. You know what? I should quit using the term, you know what. But it's harder sometimes to forgive somebody when they've hurt your feelings than it is when they've made you mad. Now, we're not supposed to do either one, but I've learned the hard way that getting mad doesn't help me at all, because all I do is it gets my stomach upset, gets my system out of whack. And then after I've been mad, I might have said something, especially if it's my wife or children or something, I said something probably that I shouldn't. And then I've got to go back and apologize. But those kind of things, you've got to learn to forgive people. And the hurt feelings sometimes may be even harder to give when somebody really, really disappoints you and hurts your feelings. And that is the kind of, I think, forgiveness that God gives us. When we sin, we're just hurting God's feelings. We hurt Him because He expects more of us. And I think that would be probably a good place for me to stop today. We don't want to make these programs too long, because I want you to tune in with us next week. And you know, I think I said this in the beginning. This is our seventh week that we haven't had worship here at our church, and we're going into the 8th week and don't know really when this is going to end. But we've got to have faith, and we've got to seek the will of God in this thing. And this is our 4th week of doing this on tape, so that we can distribute it to some of our shut-ins that we love and care about so much. So it's just been a trying time, but here we are putting it back together in a different way and trying to help you, and it's a blessing to us too. So Mickey's going to sing for us again, and you are going to be blessed again, because he's just that way.
When the Savior of man died upon Calvary's hill. I stand amazed. I stand amazed of this love that has sought me, saved me, and bought me. I stand amazed of this love that has sought me, saved me, and bought me. I stand amazed.
Oh my goodness, Mickey, what a message in song that was. What a message. Stand amazed. My goodness. You know, I'm sitting here thinking as we close our program today, and uh, I'm looking at a camera, but I just know where this message is going. And when we go on our programs on Mondays and Tuesdays, one of the things we do is go around and greet everybody. We spend a lot of time greeting the folks, and I'm a big hugger. I'm a big hugger at church and going around the rest homes. And actually, I hug everybody in the rooms, and sometimes there's men in there. I'll give them a hug too. Now I'm talking about putting my hand on the shoulder more than that, and handshaking at the same time. And at church on Sunday morning, we spend a lot of time. We take time out from our service to have a greet time, as we call it, and just get up out of our chairs and walk around. And you know what? We may not be able to go back to that. It just breaks my heart thinking about it. So, you know, we've got a lot to pray for, and it's just a hard time right now. So we feel for you. We feel for you out there. We just can't wait till we can get back to you. Maybe it may be a while. Looks like it's going to be a while because we don't want people sick, and it's just changed a lot of things. If you're not able to get out from the place now, I know a lot of time you have activity directors that take you on a bus trip to Walmart and places like that. You just can't do that now. And you know what? The people that are used to shaking hands now, I have a tendency to reach out, but you know what? We're getting away from that now. If you walk up to somebody, they kind of stand back because a lot of people are wearing masks, and this virus is very easy to transmit or catch, and so we have to be careful. But anyway, whatever we get back to, I just can't wait. So we're doing this in the interim time. So if you will, join me in prayer, and then we'll have this tape out to you, and we'll be doing another one next week. Father, we just thank you for this time to come together and our church to sponsor us, Father, in this. What a ministry it is. We just hope this message and this time of sharing, Father, more than trying to do a devotion or a sermon type thing. We're sending this out because we love you. It's and a special time. And the Lord's Prayer. I just thought so much. What it'd be a good time to share that with what's going on, and we sure need to be in prayer, Father, and seeking your will of how we should be conducting ourselves while all of this is going on in our world, and not just now, but all times, Father. So we ask you to be with us and give special comfort to those that are suffering the most and isolated the most. Just watch over them and comfort them, and we ask these things in thy name. Amen.